I was improvising on a jazz bossa nova on my Selmer saxophone. Since the keyboard is so important in jazz, not only as a keyboard player but also as a tool, I'm going to do all my demonstrations and examples on the keyboard today. So let's move over to the keyboard right now. Hello, I'm Jamie Abersold, and welcome to the world of jazz. I haven't met anyone that can't improvise, although I've met a lot of people who think they can't. But once we start to work on scales and chords and so forth, they find out that they really have a lot of improvisation inside of them and that they're actually very creative, but they just thought they weren't. Down through the ages, or the decades, let's say, especially in this century, jazz has been kept alive by a group of musicians who enjoy being creative on their instruments and improvising, which we call spontaneous music, and in this century we call it jazz. And that really is nothing more than taking melodies from your mind and play them on your instrument. It could be the piano or the guitar or the flute, the saxophone or whatever. And these people, especially in this century, have been revered. Oftentimes we feel that those kind of people that play jazz or improvise are special people and that they were born with this talent to do this. I've been into jazz education and helping people learn how to improvise for about 30 years, and I've found that everybody can really improvise, even if it's just simple melodies on a simple scale. But they have to change the way they think. They have to feel that they are worthy of learning to improvise. They have to have a certain amount of self-esteem. You have to have some discipline, and you have to have some direction. In other words, what am I going to practice? What will I spend my time on today? And what will the results be? In this video, I'm going to try to show you and demonstrate on the piano and my saxophone things that I've done, that other musicians have done, and you'll acquire a certain jazz vocabulary, what we call a jazz language. And I think that that will help to unlock the ideas that are probably in your mind right now, but you can't quite get them out on your instrument. I found that beginning improvisers, and they could be 70 years old or they could be 6 or 7 years old, just haven't had experience on their instrument. Beginning improvisers, I call them. I find that most of them have two fears when they start to improvise. They're afraid they're going to get lost. And I think when they get lost, they feel everybody's going to laugh at them. And they also are afraid that they're going to play wrong notes. So if you play a wrong note, this is a good rule to remember. If you play a wrong note, just move it up or down a half step. Let me give you a demonstration. Say you play a C minor chord, and you play this note. Hit it, move it up or down a half step. So if you remember, when you hit a note that you think is a wrong note or a poor choice, just move it up a half step or move it down a half step, and it comes back into the scale. So that takes care of one of your worries. The other problem is, well, I can't follow the scales, I can't listen to the rhythm section, the piano, bass, and drums, and keep my place. I'm going to get lost, and how will I know to get back on? We'll talk about that in just a little bit. I'll show you the form of some songs. We'll put the CD on, the play along. I'll point and show you exactly what the jazz player has been doing through all the years. Of course, they memorize all of this. If they're playing a blues and it's 12 measures long, they memorize the 12 measures, and while they're soloing, they're counting the measures in their head. And after a while, you don't really count. It's kind of like walking. When we first started to walk, you had to think about it, and then everything you did, and then you fell over and you got back up. But after a while, you don't think about it. When you run, you don't think about it. All you look at is you try to not run into things or fall into a hole. It's the same thing in music. You memorize the form to the tune, and then you don't get lost, so you solve the other problem, which is, oh my, I'm going to get lost. So I'll show you how to keep the form and not get lost. Jazz musicians have always enjoyed listening to other musicians because for many years that was the only way to gain ideas. You'd listen to somebody and you'd work out the idea at home. You take that and kind of steal that idea, so to speak. Today you can't hear jazz live very much. For the last 10 years, jazz public performance has been declining. But on CDs, cassettes, and even LPs still today, you can listen to a lot of music, a lot of jazz. So what we do is we listen to the music, and as we listen, we train our ear to hear what these other people are doing. And in the process, the jazz masters, so to speak, become our teachers. And we learn by listening. And we've discovered that just about every question that we could ask can be answered if we learn how to listen to the records or the CDs. I'll just call them records for the purpose of this video. All of the answers are on the records if you just take time to listen. And if you haven't started a jazz vocabulary of yourself, of patterns and ideas and licks, or if you haven't started a jazz collection, then I strongly suggest that you do that. Your instrument is merely a device or a means to express what you hear in your head. The jazz musician has always practiced things in all 12 keys because they never know when the composition that they're playing is going to call for them to be in a special key. So they work in all the keys, and we make it a habit of doing this. For instance, we might practice the C major scale. Or we might practice the D flat major scale. Or maybe the F sharp major scale. Those are 3 major scales. There's 9 more because there's 12 total. But we've always taken our practice time, worked on our scales and our chords and the various patterns and licks that belong to the jazz language or the jazz vocabulary, and we play those in all 12 keys because we know when we start to sing, ba do 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 da. Now that was in the key of F sharp. I knew I was in the key of F sharp because the last thing I played on the piano was the F sharp major scale. The jazz musician develops the ability to sing an idea or hear it in their head and then play it. Now before I played that, I had to think it because I was in the key of F sharp, and I thought down a half step while I was talking to you, and then I played it on the piano to confirm. So what we do is we make our fingers, the mouth, if you play a wind instrument, and your mind, you make that all part of music. And the scales and the chords are what make up music. So we practice those things in the various 12 keys. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Give you several different play-along recordings that you can practice with and things that you can do by yourself to develop your instrument and get it to the stage where it will produce spontaneously whatever you hear in your head. Jazz is music that is produced spontaneously. We call it instant composition. The difference between a composer, an arranger that writes music, they have an eraser. And if they make a mistake, they can erase it. Or if they write something one day, they come back the next day and they see, I changed something. They take their eraser and change it. But the jazz musician has to make it right the first time. So we practice on the scales and the chords, and we do it in all 12 keys. So when we compose instantaneously, it comes out exactly like we hear it. For instance, and while I was playing that, I was thinking it. But my primary thought was F, blues scale, and the fingering on the piano. And making sure that my fingers matched what I heard in my head. Whatever song or piece that you're working on is composed of several components, melody and harmony. On the harmony, that's where you get your chords, your arpeggios, and your scales. I suggest that everybody memorize the melody to the song, and if it has lyrics, words, you might want to memorize those too, because as you play the melody, if you think the words, sometimes that helps you to give more expression to it, more personality to it. And then you want to also memorize the chord progression, which we call chord scale progression. A chord, C major 7 chord, C major scale, C, C chord or arpeggio, C scale, same thing. One of the best ways to avoid getting lost is to know exactly where you are all the time. Let's take several songs. I'll play them on the CD, and I'll point out the form to them on the page here, and you can see how the jazz musician traditionally keeps their place. Now remember, they memorize all this, but we publish the books so you can have time to memorize them. This is a blues in B flat. This is off of the Volume 1 play-along recording.
1, 2, 1,
now follow
2,
along.
3, 4.
Changes to a different scale. These mean beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. C minor. A dash means minor. And we go back and do it again. Repeat. We're going to play it 11 times. Now, even while I'm talking to you, I'm listening to the music and keeping track of where I am. We're listening to piano, bass, and drums. And the drummer is using what we call brushes. Back to the beginning again. You'll see that I've written a scale out here in whole notes, and I've darkened in some of the notes. The darkened in tones are called chord tones. The entire series of whole notes makes a scale. You want to keep track of where you are at all times. This is called learning the farm to the blues. The piano player, which is me, is comping. That means accompanying. Rufus Reed is the bass player. He's walking up and down the scales and chords. And the drummer is Jonathan Higgins. He's keeping the time. The hi-hat's playing on 2 and 4. And his brushes are keeping the 4/4 time. And this goes on for 5 or 6 minutes. I encourage you to practice if you've got the play-along recording and keep your place. The first several times you want to just keep your eye on the page and maybe point like I'm doing. Don't use your instrument. Just learn where you are. Maybe try talking and see if you can get back on the track. Of course, if you listen to the bass and the piano, you can hear them change to the new key. Take a look at this. How many different scales are there? There's one. There's another one. This is the repeat of this. This is the repeat of this. Back to B flat again. We've already had that. C minor, F7. There's 2 new scales. The F7 pops up over here again. The B flat, we've had it before. If you look carefully, you'll see that the C minor and the F7 are exactly the same. E flat and B flat, E flat and B flat. So you could kind of join those two together if you wanted to. Okay, let's try another track. This one is a different form. This is not a blues. This is minor to dominant. Minor to dominant. Whenever you see a dash, that means a minor scale, Dorian minor. When you see a 7 after a letter, it means a dominant 7th. So this is going to be a series of minor to dominants, and it works its way through all 12 keys. Again, this is from the Volume 1 play-along.
1,
and let's just see if we can keep our place.
1, 2, 3, 4.
This is a bossa nova. The drummer's playing with cymbals instead of the brushes. And we're gradually working our way through all 12 keys. And as you can see, I've written out the scales for you, and I've darkened in the chord tones. Now we've just made it through 6 keys, and we're going to go through the other 6. This piece is based on 2 and 4 bar phrases. The beginner could play whole notes or half notes, or maybe play the first couple of notes. And we go back and repeat again. This one is played 5 times. So the form on this song is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You see the double bar. 12 measures, then another 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that constitutes one chorus. And after it plays 5 times, it'll stop on the E flat chord. Okay, let's take a look at a song now that really doesn't have a melody, and it's based on 8 measure phrases. This is from the Volume 1 play-alongs to the very first track. So it's going to have 3 different scales. All of them are Dorian minor scales. I've written the scales out for you and darkened in the chord tones. Incidentally, in this Volume 1 book, if you play a transposing instrument like the trumpet or alto saxophone or clarinet or even the trombone or the bass, all the parts are transposed for you. This is for treble clef instruments here like the piano and guitar and the flute. But all of your parts are in the book, so you don't have to worry about not knowing the scales. Let's listen to this track.
1, 2,
it's in 4/4 time.
3, 4.
2, 3. Keep track of where you are. 4, 5. I'm counting measures. 6, 7. Now get ready. 8, 2, 3, 4. Did you hear the change to the new key? Now we're in the key of E flat minor, Dorian minor. 5, 6. I'm counting measures. 7, 8. Now, hear the change? The drummer hits at the beginning of this measure, the first measure, and they're going to play 8 measures of D, Dorian minor. And when they finish this, they'll come back to the beginning. They're going to play the whole sequence 4 times. Did you hear the beginning? Where are we right now? See if you can clap your hands at the beginning of the next scale, right here. Boom. That was it. Keep track of where you are. 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8. New scale. Now you clap your hands at the end of this one, or rather at the beginning of this one. Did you get it? 2, 3, 4. Try to get the next one. Here we come. You hear it? Usually the drummer gives it away by hitting the cymbal a little bit heavier, and the bass player always dives into the root of the chord. You might want to listen to the piano. You'll get so you can hear all 3 instruments, and they'll help guide you into the new key. Six, 7, 8. Now let's try the next track. 4 measures apiece instead of 8.
4.
Same 3 scales. Keep track of where you are. Hear them change? This is called learning the form to the tune. Now on this track, they play it 9 times. Back to the beginning. Then we go to here. In the last one, 2, 3, 4. Each of the chord symbols actually represents a scale and a chord, and the chord could be called an arpeggio. Let's see what it sounds like in the key of C. That's the C major scale, and I played it from the root all the way up to the 9th, which is called the 2nd note of the scale. That's called horizontal. Horizontal is scale. The arpeggio we think of as vertical because we go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. We build up that way. It would sound like this. That's vertical, that's a chord, and that's called arpeggios. When people improvise, they use arpeggios or chords and bits and pieces of scales. They also use the chromatic scale. Let's take a B flat major scale, play it with the play along. Let's use volume 24. It's called major and minor. Let's take the B flat major scale. I'll show you how to practice it, give you 3 or 4 ways to do it, and then let's see if we can improvise with it. And I suggest that you do this in your house. Track number 1,
2,
B flat major
2,
scale
3,
in whole
4.
notes. get used to the fingering and the sound of each note. Let's go all the way up to the ninth. Here's the ninth. I'll come down in quarter notes. Now I'll go back up in eighth notes. Now let's do 16th notes. And all the time, I'm listening to the rhythm section. The piano, the bass, and the drums to keep my place. Now let me improvise. I'm just playing what I hear in my head. I'm using repetition, syncopation. I end on the root. Now I'll start on the fifth. I'm playing what I hear in my head. As a matter of fact, some musicians, especially bass players and guitar players, will sing while they play, like this. Again. One more time. I'm playing the scale in thirds. I'm not really improvising. I'm playing an exercise. Playing the B flat major scale in thirds. How about this one? Haven't we all practiced this one? Or maybe this one? And when I practice these little exercises, I try to make them as musical and interesting as possible. Maybe I'm always keeping track of where I am. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. It just becomes part of me. Over and over. So I've got that memorized. Now then, I'm not at the piano, let's say. Let's say I'm through making this video, and I'm out in the car driving home. I could still be singing boop boopy da boop booba doo boo day boo bo dee da 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 da. For instance, ba da da dee doo da 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 booba doo be doo doo da. I know right where I'm at. That's because I've memorized the keyboard in my mind and the sounds of the notes because I've been practicing them, and they become part of me. So if someone were to say, "Hey, let's jam on the B flat major scale," that would be the easiest thing in the world for me to do because that's a simple scale. Now, if they were to say, let's play a tune written by John Coltrane called Giant Steps at a very fast tempo, then I'd have to stop and think about it because that has many, many scales and they move quickly. Nothing like what we just demonstrated here with the volume 24. So I'd have to think and decide if I'm ready to play that or not. And if I knew in advance that we were going to play giant steps, then I would sit down and practice on the different scales and the chords, just like I practiced the B-flat major scale here for you. Okay, now let's take this B-flat major play-along, the track, and superimpose or substitute some other scales that'll fit. And you listen and see if you like them. I'll tell you what they are.
1.
What's this one?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Anybody know what that is? What country does that remind you of? That's called a B-flat major pentatonic scale. Pentatonic, penta means 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 5-note scale. You use the first note, the second, the third, the fifth, and the sixth. All right? Now listen to this one. See what you think of it. Now that's an unusual sound, isn't it? That's a minor pentatonic. And you lower the third, fourth, fifth, lower the seventh note, and the root. It's a 5-note scale. Many beginners, especially guitar players, use that sound, and they like that sound. It's very close to the blues scale. Here's the blues scale. Now then, if we take the B-flat major scale, the B-flat minor pentatonic, major pentatonic, and the B-flat blues scale and start to improvise, we end up with a lot of resources. And we can have some variety. Let's see what happens. 1, 2, ready, play. What did I do there? That's the blues scale. Now let's mix the blues scale and the B-flat major. See how I'm mixing the different sounds together? Minor pentatonic, major scale. Now let's try the minor pentatonic. Now let's just improvise and you try to figure out what I'm doing. What is that one? That's the major pentatonic. Minor pentatonic. Blues scale, B-flat blues. think you can tell by listening that by having the different choices at my disposal, when I improvise, I'm more comfortable because I have more things to choose from. And I suggest that you do the same thing. With whatever scale you're working with, check to see if you also know different scales, like the major pentatonic, the minor pentatonic. Can you play the blues scale in the key that you're working on? And of course, do you know the major scale? I suggest when you practice each day that you spend part of your practice time improvising. A good way to start, especially for those of you that have never done it before, is to take one note. Sing a note, then play it on your instrument. Sing another note, play it on your instrument. Sing another note, play it on your instrument. Then sing two notes. Keep them close together and find those notes. By doing that, you'll gain a lot of confidence. And you'll notice if you do this for a week or two or a month or 6 months, you'll turn the radio on, turn a record on, turn the TV on, and if you want to, you might be able to figure out what's going on, the notes of the melody. You can hear the intervals, the distances between one note and another. That all begins, I think, with this urge to improvise, which everybody has. And you'll notice as you start to sing your melodies and things, and then you actually play them, that a lot of times you're singing bits and pieces of scales and chords. And that seems to be the foundation for Western music. And that's why I suggest that as you practice your music that's written on the page, your exercise books or whatever you're working on, maybe transcribes, jazz solos, maybe some licks and some patterns, this, that, and the other, don't forget, the main reason you're playing is to improvise. So you've got to make time, make room every day for yourself. And let the melodies of your mind come right out your instrument, whatever instrument that is. Don't be afraid to do it, and don't put it off. I've met a lot of people that have bought my play-along records and books and various other materials that we recommend, and they practice and practice and practice, but they keep putting off or delaying actually improvising. You don't want to do that. I feel that when someone learns the first couple notes on the keyboard, for instance, they should turn right around and improvise with those notes. 1, 2, ready, play. Simple melodies, but get the connection between your mind and the keyboard, or the mind and whatever instrument you play. Very important. Oftentimes the beginning improviser will say, well, I can't think of things to play right now. How do I get new ideas? One of the best ways, I think, to stir your imagination is to listen to jazz. I've got a tremendous jazz collection myself. I started buying records probably when I was 11, 12 years old. Started with 78s of Count Basie and Duke Ellington. And then when the LP record came out, the first one I bought was Chet Baker in Europe. I virtually memorized everything on that record. And then I kept buying records. I've got thousands of records because I enjoy listening to the music. Also, I'm an educator, and I feel like I need to know what's happening so I can convey that to the people that I work with. So if you haven't started a record collection or a CD collection, cassettes or whatever, I think you're going to have trouble improvising if you don't listen to the music. As a matter of fact, I know you are. Oftentimes I run into band directors who maybe have a stage band, but yet they don't have anybody that improvises, and they ask me, how can I get the people to improvise? I always tell them one of the best ways is get the people, the students, some records, let them listen to it, talk about what you hear. Listen for the bass, listen for the drums, listen for the guitar, listen for the piano, listen to the soloist. Maybe even try to analyze or take off some of the solos or portions of the solos. And listen to them very acutely with your left brain. That's the side that analyzes music. And then let the right side think about what it is it's learned and try to put that out through your instrument yourself. I think a lot of people don't listen to jazz because they're afraid if they listen, they're going to sound like the people they play like. If that were the case, there would be a lot of trumpet players listening to Miles Davis and sounding like Miles Davis, or Clifford Brown, or Lee Morgan, or Freddie Hubbard, or Woody Shaw. You can't just sound like somebody by listening to them. But what you can do is develop your own personality. And the best way to do that is through listening. It's a sharing of ideas. It's a very common thing. Always has been for jazz musicians. Just take a moment and stop and think. When your telephone rings and you pick it up and the other person says hello, and you say, oh, hi, Joe, or hi, Mary, or hi, Mom, or hi, Dad, how do you know who that is when they only said one word? They said hello. Or maybe they say your name, Jamie. And I instantly know who it is. Sometimes I can even tell when I pick the phone up that it's going to be another country. like maybe Australia, just because of the way the telephone sounds when it makes the connection. I instantly start thinking of people I know in Australia. I visualize their faces and their names. And as soon as I hear their voice, boom, I know who they are. In music, we do the same thing. For instance, B-flat major, B major 7, and the top note, which is a B-flat, is now the major 7th. It was the tonic or the root. Now it's the major 7. C minor 7. Now it's a lowered 7th. D-flat 7 with a sharp 4, and there's the 13th or the 6th in the melody. There's D7 with a sharp 9 and a sharp 5 in the melody. That's my B-flat. E-flat minor. That's the 5th in the melody. E Lydian. E major, but we've got the sharp 4, which is the Lydian note in the melody. F Dorian minor, F minor, and the 4th note of the scale, or the 11th, is in the melody. There's F sharp major 7, and the 3rd is in the melody. There's G7 with an augmented 5th, raised 5th, and a raised 9th, or an augmented 9th, in the melody. Now we've got A flat 7, and there's the 9th in the melody. A7, flat 9, A dominant 7th, flat 9 in the melody, and we end up with a B flat triad again, with the B flat on the top. Now my point in doing this little example for you is, I kept B flat on the top. You might want to think of it as, you're in your backyard, it's summertime, and you're drinking some lemonade. All of a sudden, something important happens. You put your suit on, you're going to a wedding, you're all dressed up. Ah, there's minor, and you're the 7th. It starts to rain, so you dress differently. There's a dominant 7th with a sharp 4, and now you're the 6th. Maybe it's kind of a question. It's like, should I do this or should I do that? That one there is kind of an angry sound, a dark sound. That's the D7 with the sharp 9, and now you are the sharp 5. And maybe you're angry. Maybe you're saying, no, I don't want to do that. Now it's raining. That's a minor day. Oftentimes we think of minor chords as being rainy days or sad times. And you're the 5th. You're just sort of sitting there. And all of a sudden somebody says something. Now you're the sharp 4 of a major chord. That's a Lydian scale. If you work on these sounds, you'll get to the point where you'll be able to hear and identify what's happening all the time. For instance, I'll bet many of you watching this video know what this is. I'll bet you can sense already that this is a blues, because you've heard the blues and you've practiced the blues. Since you've been watching this video, I'll bet you'll recognize this. That's our old friend, the B-flat major scale, off of the volume 24 play along. What if I did this? Can you tell that I went up a half step? Now I'm in the key of B. What if I do this? Could you tell I'm now in the key of C? If you can, you're starting to hear things. This is called ear training. What about if I did this? Can you tell I'm back to the key of B flat? I am. You'll get to the point where when you hear a chord, dominant 7th, and you may even know G dominant 7th, D flat 7, and the melody note is the 6th. C7 sus, or G minor with a C in the bass. F triad, A flat triad, B triad, D triad, C triad, A triad, B flat triad, A flat triad, F triad. The longer you work at it, you'll get to the point where when you hear a sound, it'll be just like picking up the telephone and you meet an old friend. And sometimes you hear the first sound and your mind will anticipate the next one and the next one, because the chords work in sequence oftentimes. You know right where I'm going, don't you? I'm going down in half steps, 2 5s, minor to dominant, and I'll finally cadence. The ear knows a lot, but it doesn't know how to describe it. So that's why we study, and that's where jazz education has become so popular. Let's examine the blues. Let's take the B-flat blues first, and then we'll work with the F blues. Let's take the B-flat blues on the Volume 1 play-along record, and let me just do some exercises, and you see if you can figure out what I'm doing. B-flat blues, 12 measure blues. Be careful, the blues scale is a series of tones, but the blues progression, or what we call the blues, is 12 measures long. Also, on that blues scale, you can add several notes. You can add the second note of the scale, second, and you can add the sixth note, because 6, 2, the 2 and the 9 are the same. So you come up with a scale that sounds like this. But we never practice that sound because it doesn't sound familiar to our ears. But we do take the basic blues scale and we add to it the 6th and the 9th or the 2nd. So let's put the record on, the CD on, play the B-flat blues. Let me do several exercises.
1, 2.
You see if you can figure out what I'm doing.
2, 3, 4.
Here's another exercise. What am I doing? I'm just playing the first 3 notes of each scale. Can you hear that it matches the CD? What's this one? Try it. 1, 3, 5, 3, 1. You might want to sing. 1, 3, 5, 3, 1. La la la, la la la, la la la, la la la. What's this? First 5 notes of each scale. Now the minor scale, F7, B flat. Now what's this? Seventh chords, 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. What's this? So I practiced the root, first 3 notes, excuse me. Then I did the triad, I think. Then I did the first 5 notes. Then I did the 7th chord and the 9th chord. Those are exercises that we usually always practice before we play a tune. Now, after you practice for 6 months or a year on these, and you look at a new song, you're not going to go through these simple exercises because you already know them. But for the beginning improviser, no matter what song you're playing, it could be the B-flat major scale, It could be the volume 1, the first 3 scales, F minor, E flat minor, D minor. I suggest that you take a practice procedure like this on each of those scales before you start to improvise. And you might spend 20 or 30 minutes practicing. But what it does is it gets your fingers coordinated with your mind and with the left side of your brain. You can see the notes, you know the notes of the names of the notes, and then you can produce them on your instrument. And then your imagination can, so to speak, sort of go wild and make some jazz for you. But if you don't know what scales you're going to play or what the fingering is going to be, then you'll probably play wrong notes, you'll make some mistakes, and then you'll get discouraged, and a lot of people quit. They say, I knew I couldn't play jazz. But that's not right. They're just not properly prepared. Now let's take this same blues and let me just improvise for a second, and you see if you can hear what I'm doing. I'm going to back the track up and start it again.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Second chorus. Repetition and sequence. Very simple, keeping my place, and I know where I'm at. Now I'm playing the blues scale. Sequence. It could almost be a melody. Now watch this. Scale. 6. Repetition. Repetition builds tension. It's okay to do it again. And then maybe do something different. Now remember, I'm singing this in my head as I play it. Do it again. Change the top note. Something different. Here's the ending. Can you see how I used variety in order to keep things going? I think that was 11 courses of blues. Started out simply, got a little bit busier, used some repetition, used some sequence. All the time, though, I'm playing what I hear in my head. One or two times, things almost got away from me, but I made them into something else. So the improviser learns to improvise when you're improvising. Even if you don't play what you're supposed to play, you learn how to get out of corners, so to speak. You hit a poor choice or a wrong note or a note that you didn't hit to play, and your mind says, oh, well, let's take that and make something with it. And it takes practice to do that. Oftentimes the beginner, when you hit what we call a poor choice, like, say we got this card, and you hit that note there, well, you'll stop, and then everybody knows that note was wrong. But if you'll maybe go, and maybe do it again, the audience probably thinks, oh, that's what you meant to do. You just had the presence of mind to take a poor choice note, move it up a half step into the scale, use your imagination, and go on about your business. Now, that was a demonstration on the B-flat blues. I suggest that you try different types of exercises on whatever song you're working on. If you're working on Giant Steps by John Coltrane, then try some simple exercises before you improvise. If you're doing the one simple scale, like on the B-flat major scale, practice some exercises first, because what it does is it loosens your mind up. It allows you to be freer. It takes away some of the fear of playing. Okay, now let's take a blues progression in the key of B-flat. We're going to listen to a recorded background off of the volume 42, Blues in All 12 Keys Play Along. You'll hear James Williams on the piano, Bob Cranshaw on the bass, and Mickey Roker on the drums. And I overdubbed myself playing the saxophone, and I went through a practice routine, which you'll find in your guide booklet, which comes with your video cassette. I'm going to start off with the roots, then I'll play the first two notes, then the first three notes, and I'll gradually work my way through 8 choruses. The first 4 choruses will be swing, and the second 4 will be bossa nova. So this will show you that you can play the blues as a swing, jazz blues, or you can play it also as a bossa nova. On the 5th chorus, you'll hear the rhythm section shift over to the bossa nova feel. I oftentimes think of the blues as being 3 4-bar sections. The first 4 measures are the beginning. The second 4 bars are the middle section, the development, and then the last 4 bars are the ending, and they lead us back to the beginning again. I recommend that you, of course, memorize the blues progression, especially in the key of F concert and B-flat concert, because that's the most popular keys for the jazz musicians. So let's give a listen to me playing my saxophone, playing very simple exercises. I'll vary the rhythm. Now, I've written them on the page here in whole notes and just simple little rhythms, but you'll hear me playing different rhythms because I'm improvising, using my imagination with my rhythms, trying to make this exercise as interesting as I possibly can. And sometimes I'll take one measure, I might take it up an octave and bring it down an octave. I'm trying to keep things interesting.
1, 2,
here we go.
4.
I'm just playing the tonic or the root, the first note of each scale. And you'll notice that this blues progression is going to be a little bit different than the one we looked at earlier. It's got a half diminished chord to a dominant. There's your 2 chord, which is a minor. That's your 5 chord. Then we have a turnaround. This is called a turnaround on the ending. Now I'm going to play the first 2 notes of each scale. I'm mixing up the rhythms, trying to make it swing, making a simple exercise feel good. Last 4 bars, turnaround coming up. 3rd chorus, first 3 notes of the scale. Play the first 5 notes. Can you hear them? First 5 notes of the scale. Up and down. I drop down an octave. Up and down. Now we're getting ready for the bossa nova. hear the rhythm section change? I'm playing triads. 1, 3, 5. There's a diminished chord. Major, minor, minor, minor. We've got a new chord progression here. A little more interesting. A little more challenging. Now I'll play the 7th chord. One, 3, 5, 7. Diminished. Turn around. Leads me to the beginning of a new chorus. 9th chord. Diminished. And finally, we get ready for the last one. I'm going to play the entire scale. And I'm just about finished. Turn around. And I do a little improvisation there on the ending. So, what started out very simple ended up pretty complex. But by the time I played those 8 choruses, let's say it was 3 or 4 minutes, I'm getting the feel for these scales. And my fingers are getting used to the note patterns. So when I improvise, I've got a better chance of making some music and making it sound like jazz. A regiment like this, on whatever song you're going to play, is advised. You could be playing giant steps, or you could be playing one scale, or maybe a song like Cantaloupe Island that has 3 different scales, or Maiden Voyage that has 4 different scales, or maybe Song for My Father by Horace Silver. But whatever tune you're working on, make sure you know your scales and your chords, and I suggest that you practice in a systematic manner. Now, this little routine here is written in the little booklet that comes with your video, so check it out, and you may have to transpose it for your instruments, but don't let it be a stumbling block for you. Let it be something that will give you the confidence to go ahead and start to improvise, especially on the blues. Now, you'll notice in that last exercise of the 8 different exercises on the blues that I didn't play the blues scale, the minor pentatonic, or the major pentatonic, but you could add extra exercises to it yourself. Or you could play in thirds, or you could play anything that comes to your mind. Any type of little exercise maybe that you've gotten out of an exercise book will work. Remember, the exercises are supposed to guide you and help you towards improvising. Don't become a person that is really good at practicing exercises but can't improvise. Make sure that the exercises lead you to more creativity on your instrument. Whenever you play a melody, it could be a written melody out of a book, maybe out of one of the play-along books or a fake book or whatever, or it could be one that originates in your mind. You want to always personalize the melody. That is, don't just play it like it's written in a booklet. Make it your melody. Some of the notes you'll hold a little longer than others, some of them you'll cut a little bit shorter. Maybe you'll add some rest, maybe you'll subtract some rest. But basically make the melody as you would hear it in your head. We call this personalizing a melody. Now, if you play the melody in unison with another instrument or several other instruments, then you have to stop and agree how you're going to articulate it and when you're going to take your breaths, when you're going to slur, when you're going to tongue, or it won't sound very good. So make sure that if you're playing it by yourself, you've got the freedom to personalize it, but when you play with others, you have to rehearse and agree how you're going to play it, or just read it like it is on the page. When you play the blues, one of the first things that people gravitate towards is the blues scale. I hear many people play the blues, the 12-bar blues, but all they play is the blues scale. And it gets very boring, very monotonous. So what we need to do is take the blues scale and use it as a coloring scale for your regular dominant 7 scales like we practiced on the exercise previous to this one. I'd like to put the volume 54 play-along on, play the blues. I'm playing the piano, comping. Tyrone Wheeler is the bass player and Steve Davis is the drummer. I'm going to play just the right hand on the piano and do several things. I'll play the blues scale, but I'll also play the regular scales. And see if you don't think the blues scale kind of stands out and is special since I save it maybe for the endings of phrases or the end of a blues chorus, and then start my next chorus maybe with a regular scale. I'll use variety. See if you don't think this sounds interesting. Also, I'll try to play simple things to begin with and gradually get a little more and more busy, a little more energy going as the solo builds. Now, I'm not going to throw in the left hand because this video isn't necessarily for piano players. We're talking about soloing, and it's for all instruments. So that's why I'm just going to use the right hand. Here we go, blues in F.
1, 2.
I'll start off simply.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Just taking my time. This is almost like a little melody. Turn around. I kind of stretch the scale out just a little bit. Blues scale. Minor. Blues scale. Now I've abandoned the blues scale. Sometimes I run fast, sometimes I play very slow. I'm emphasizing the ninth. Ninth. Wasn't that unexpected? So there I've used dominant scales, I used the minor pentatonic, I used the blues scale, and I feel like I could play for a long time. I'm just getting started, just taking my time. If I didn't have to sit and talk to you, I'd probably be playing a little bit busier by now. But I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm doing so you can see what I'm doing and hear that it gradually builds. Now, if you, for instance, if you're a piano player, or if you listen to piano players, which I hope you do, you go out now and listen to Oscar Peterson, or Herbie Hancock play jazz, or Chick Corea, or Red Garland, or any of the great jazz piano players. Listen to them play a blues and see if you don't hear them doing things that I'm doing on here, because everybody does it. Jazz or bossa novas are usually played in 4/4 time, although we can play in 3/4. When jazz players play slow songs, we usually call those ballads. The jazz repertoire is usually made up of blues, ballads, standards, those are songs that usually originated in Broadway shows in New York City, and there's thousands of standards. Then there's the jazz standards. Those are songs that jazz players have written and have become popular in the jazz community. And then there's original songs, songs that maybe I write, or maybe you write, and you play them in your hometown, or with your combo, your jazz band, maybe at school, and those are called originals. Maybe nobody outside your family ever hears you play those tunes, but you like to play on the harmony and the melody. So the repertoire for jazz musicians is pretty big, pretty big. But usually things are played in 4/4 or in 3/4. Now, if you're in another country, like South America, say, maybe Brazil, you might play in 7/4 or 9/4, different rhythms. If you go to China or Japan or Israel or other countries, you're going to play in different time signatures. You're also going to use different scales. They're not going to use major scales and minor scales like we do in the Western world. But the jazz tradition for the last 80 years or 90 years has been based on major, minor, dominant seventh, half diminished, and the blues scale. And those sonorities or those qualities make up the basic component of jazz. The jazz musician likes to play things fast. It's always been a challenge to see if you can finger on your instrument, whatever instrument you play, the ideas that you hear in your mind. And since we're talking about the creative art or the creative aspect of your imagination, there's no end to what you can think. And if you're constantly listening to records, CDs and so forth, or maybe live performances, it spurs you on and you say, gee, I wonder if I could do that. And you try it. And as you try that, then your imagination shows you other things to do. So we end up trying to play fast, but we also play very slow. And we play tempos in between. There's really no jazz tempo. But the better jazz musicians have recorded things at very slow tempos and also very fast. So they've set the parameters for the jazz players, and all of us that come along after these great jazz masters and try to play, we practice a lot of times with a metronome, very slow, and then very fast. If you can play things fast, you can usually play them at any of the slower tempos. So if you're working on your scales and your chords or any type of exercise, don't practice them slowly forever. You're wasting your time. Practice them slowly, then tomorrow a little faster, the next day a little faster. Get them moving so they sound like what you hear in your mind. Don't waste your time perfecting every little thing. It'll come in time. I feel that having some keyboard knowledge is important for everybody. Even though you're not a keyboard player, nowadays you can go out and buy these small Casio, Yamaha keyboards for $100 or less. Put your earphones in, learn voicings, maybe learn the blues scale, learn some major scales. I think learning 2- and 3-note voicings are very important for everybody. They help you to learn songs very quickly. For instance, if I'm playing, let's say I'm going to play Summertime. The chords. I just played through Summertime quickly. I was thinking the melody in my head. I just played 2 notes in the right hand, the 3rd and the 7th. The 3rd and the 7th are the 2 most important notes of any scale. Once you have your root, if you play the 7 and the 3, everybody knows what the sound is. That gives you the whole scale. I recommend for everybody that you learn simple 2 and 3 and 4 note voicings for whatever song you're going to play. And I think you'll find that it's quite entertaining to yourself, because especially if you're like a trumpet player or a saxophone or trombone, flute, where you're only playing melody, all of a sudden your left hand can play a chord and your right hand makes you feel more like a musician. As an example, let's take the blues off of the volume 1. I've cut the piano channel out. That's the right channel. We're only going to listen to the bass, Rufus Reed, and the drummer, Jonathan Higgins, and they're on the left channel. I'm going to play 2-note voicings for the first chorus, 12-bar blues in B flat. The second chorus, I'll play 3-note voicings, and the third chorus, I'll play 4-note voicings. And I think you'll see that they're very simple, but yet they give you the feeling and the flavor, the texture of the blues.
1, 2.
2-note voicings.
1, 2, 3, 4.
course, I've got the blues memorized. If you don't have it memorized, you have to look at it in the booklet. Now, that was the first course. Here's the second course. 3 notes. Doesn't that sound like something you've heard before? C minor, F7, B flat 7, F. Now let's go to 4 notes. C minor, F7, 4 notes, spread out. I'm playing a typical jazz rhythm. Pop, pop. C minor. I think everyone should spend a little time, 5 or 10 minutes every day, and just work on simple voicings, because it helps you to hear the totality of what's going on, the harmony, not just the melody line. And then when you improvise, you'll be able to improvise better lines, because inside your mind, you'll be able to hear the harmony, the third, the seventh, and so forth. Believe me, it works. There are some very good books to learn jazz voicings. I'd like to mention several of them. Dan Hurley has several books. His last name is Haerle. He teaches at the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas. Another one is by Frank Mantooth, a very good book on voicings. Mark Levine in San Francisco has a very good book out called Jazz Piano. I've got several transcribed piano voicings off of the play-alongs. For instance, the Volume 50 play-along has all of the piano transcriptions that Mark Levine plays on that play-along are in a booklet and are available. The Volume 1 that I've been using today, the one we just listened to, all of my piano comping on there has been transcribed and put in a booklet. The Volume 55 Jerome Kern book with Hal Galper, all of his comping is in a booklet. And there's several others that you can get too. That way you can actually see what these people are doing and take your pencil and analyze it. I encourage you to do that. One of the times when jazz musicians start to practice, they say to themselves, oh, well, I'll not practice right now. I'll go get me something to drink. I'll go watch TV. I'll go to bed. I'll call a friend. Maybe go visit a friend. I'll do it tomorrow. What we're doing at that point is we're battling with our ego, and our ego wins. The ego is that part of us that wants us to stay exactly like we are. When it senses that you want to improve yourself and to learn things, that's when it says, relax, you're okay just like you are. I think traditionally the jazz musician has taken the ego and put it up on the shelf and has said, I know there's things I don't know, and the only way I'm going to get better is to work on them. So they dive in, and they practice whatever needs to be practiced. They sharpen their ears, they sharpen their technique and their facility, they listen to recordings constantly, they study books, they study transcribed solos, and what happens? 6 months later, they sound much better. A year later, they sound a lot better. It is said that Charlie Parker, the famous jazz saxophonist that died in 1955, his nickname was Bird. It is said in his own words on a taped interview with Paul Desmond, the saxophonist that played with the Dave Brubeck Quartet for years, Charlie Parker told Paul Desmond that he practiced 11 to 15 hours a day for 3 to 4 years. Now, when I heard that tape, probably 5 years ago, maybe 1988, 89, when I heard that tape, I said, oh, wow, that means that Charlie Parker became a great musician because he practiced. I think in my mind, my ego had always said that Charlie Parker was a great musician, but he was born with that talent, that God gave him that talent at birth, and that's why he was so good. But when I listened to him talk on that interview and another one, I understand, no, Charlie Parker was just like everybody else. He didn't know anything when he started. As a matter of fact, in his own words, he went out and played a set-in with a band one night, and the band was playing very slowly, Body and Soul. Like that. He's playing 2 other melodies, Up a Lazy River and Honeysuckle Rose. which has nothing to do with the song the band was playing. He didn't even know that when you played a song with the band that you were supposed to play the same song. Now, when I heard that recording, probably 15 years ago, I said, oh, wow, maybe Charlie Parker did start just like all the rest of us. So I tell you this little story just to remind you that the greatest people are great because they work hard. And you can excel in the area of jazz if you work hard too. But listening is a key thing. If I wanted to leave one thing with you on this videotape, like my best advice, it would be listen to the jazz masters. Listen to the jazz masters. Every question you have can be answered on the recordings if you learn to listen to the answers. If you are a teacher and you're teaching the basics of whatever instrument you play and whatever instrument you teach, I strongly suggest that you play your instrument along with the student. If you're using the Volume 1 or the Volume 24 or the Volume 21 play-along recordings, and you're encouraging your students to learn their scales and their chords and their fingerings and get good sound on their instrument and play musically, I strongly suggest that you give them an example and play along with them, because they can learn from your sound and from your technique and from your imagination. The fourth note of a major scale and the fourth note of a dominant seventh scale has a lot of what we call inherent tension. It's just there. And if you play that note against the chord, like you start a phrase on it or you end a phrase on it, it's really going to sound strange. Let me play C major. Here's the fourth. I think your ear can tell that that note needs to be moved to another note. What we usually do is put that note in the middle. We use it as a passing tone. That's the fourth. Now listen, I'll play the third, the fourth, and the fifth. Sounds okay that way. I'm playing the third on the downbeat, and the fourth comes on an upbeat. That's the weak part of the beat. And when we play it on the upbeat, our ear says, oh, that's fine. But if you play the fourth on the downbeat like this, your ear goes, oh, what's happening? We never sing that way. It's very difficult to sing wrong notes. It really is. It's easy to play them because we don't know what we're playing or what key we're in. But when you play, if you emphasize the third and the fifth on the downbeat and let the fourth come on the upbeat, you'll sound like professional musicians. Let me give you an example. I played the fourth twice, and it always came on the upbeat. Now, that was major. Here's dominant seventh. It wants to come down. Sometimes on dominant sevenths we raise them up a half step. And that becomes a Lydian dominant scale. C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B flat, C. Very pretty sound. So in that case, on the dominants, the jazz player has learned that if they raise it a half step, they come up with a brand new scale. And it was a very popular sound in bebop. Ninth, sixth, F sharp in the key of C, A, C. Very pretty sound. I strongly recommend that you try to memorize everything. Memorize your chords and your scales. Memorize the melodies to the tunes. Memorize the lyrics if you have them. If you can't, that might help you to play the melody. Maybe even memorize some solos. For instance, if you're playing Four by Miles Davis, do you have the original recording? When you're playing it, can you actually hear some of Miles Davis's solo going on in your mind? And maybe at times you'll play bits and pieces of it. If so, I'm sure there will be listeners, if they're used to listening to jazz, and they'll recognize it, and they'll like you for it. Because it's like you're playing a part of them. They know that solo. You know the solo. Here's a part of it. So I highly recommend that you memorize everything. And oftentimes you can memorize some of the basic material away from your instrument. Maybe when you're lying in bed at night trying to get to sleep and you can't, lay there and think through the chord progression to the blues and then try to spell each of the scales. Or maybe pick another tune, maybe a standard, or maybe just 8 measures of a song. Take small sections. Things that you can digest and feel good about. Pickup notes are very important in jazz. They help start your phrase. They let the listener know exactly where the beginning of the section is. And they help delineate the time. Let me give you an example of a couple pickups. Didn't you know that was the beginning? Let me play several pickups I'll put a left-hand bass line in it. I'll just play kind of a turnaround figure in the key of F. Watch how many different pickups I play. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. These are all pickups. That one's a little longer. They all point to the first note of the first measure. There's thousands of pickups. Simple ones, one-note pickups. But it lets the listener know exactly where you are. Pickups lead. Pickups lead. And many beginning improvisers do just the opposite. They let the rhythm section go, and then they start to play. The rhythm section plays, and then you start. Don't be one of those people. Be a person that knows exactly where the time is. When you hear, if you're playing with a play along and you hear the count of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, when you get to about beat 3, play something. 1, 2, 3, ba-doo, boo-bamp. And one of the simplest things to play is 5 to 1. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8 is 1. Or just 5 to 1. 5, 1, but play it 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, and play it with energy and enthusiasm. Let the listener know that you know exactly where you're at. Pickups are very important, and you don't play them just at the beginning of a song. You can play them at the beginning of almost any phrase, because our music is built in 2, 4, and 8 bar phrases. So every 2 bars you can really use pickups if you want to. Again, looking at some transcribed solos would be valuable for you. Everywhere I go, people ask me, what play-along record should I buy first? Which one should I practice first? And I always say, well, which ones do you have? Now, if they don't have any, here's what I recommend. If they're a beginning improviser, I'd start with volume 24, major and minor. The reason for starting with it is, it's very easy. We started out the video with that, the B-flat major scale. It's a bossa nova, and I found that playing bossa nova relaxes the left side of the brain. That's the side that does the thinking. That's the side that fear resides in, incidentally. That's the side that says, uh-oh, let's not improvise because we're not prepared. Okay? Well, the major and minor, volume 24, coupled with the bossa nova, I found helps people to relax. It allows them to play their scales and enjoy practicing scales and chords. Plus, it gets them into improvisation and being creative with the scales. And usually what happens is they say, oh, wow, I'd like to play some more scales. So they try a different track. And the next thing you know, after several months' time, maybe they've played through all 12 major keys and enjoyed doing it because they're improvising with it. Now, the next one, as far as learning the basics, is called Getting It Together. This is volume 21. It's a 2 CD set, or 2 record set, or 1 cassette. And it's a pretty big book. We've got 30 different tracks on it, 31 tracks. Each one of the tracks, with the exception of the last 2, go through all 12 keys. It's very thorough. It's not the play-along that you want to buy to improvise with if you're a beginner, because it'll be very frustrating for you. But if you realize the need for practicing your scales and your chords in the different keys, and also major, minor, dominant 7, half diminished, Lydian, diminished, whole tone, harmonic minor, and melodic minor. I think those are the ones that are on there. And then we have the blues in F and the blues in B flat. If you're interested in practicing those scales and hearing those sounds, volume 21 is for you. The tempos are not fast. The music's all written out in the book. The scales are written out. And it's very easy once you understand what it is you're supposed to do. After that, I suggest volume 1. This is the one that has most of my thoughts on beginning improvisation. But for beginning improvisers, very beginning, I think maybe the volume 24 and the volume 1 work well together, because you can read about how to improvise here and apply it on the simple scales here. And then as you gain some knowledge, you can start to play the blues on here, or maybe the 3 scales that start out the very first track or the second track, and kind of get your feet wet, so to speak. And then from there you can go to any of the ones that you feel like you can play. Volume 54 I highly recommend, because the tempos are slow and the songs are always played at jam sessions. We put that package together especially for the beginning improviser. After you've been improvising for a month or 2 or maybe 6 months and want to learn some tunes, volume 54, Maiden Voyage, is probably the one for you. In addition to your major, your minor, your dominant seventh, your half diminished, and your blues scales, there's another scale that jazz players love to play. It's called the bebop scale. Here's what it sounds like. And oftentimes it's played from the top to the bottom and back up, because that's the way it's played. Very pretty sound. Now that was over a dominant seventh. 3, 4, 5, 6, lowered seventh, major seventh, and the root. The added note is the major seventh. And it doesn't sound very good, but you always play it on the upbeat, on the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... That was dominant seventh. Over the major... The added note, all the bebop scales are 8-note scales. On the major, we add the sharp 5 in between the regular 5th and the 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sharp 5, 6, 7, 1. And again, you want to make sure that the sharp 5 always occurs on the upbeat. Now, if I started on E and came down to E and went back up. Now listen, I'll start on D. And by starting on D and playing 8 notes, it forces the G sharp to come on a downbeat. See what you think it sounds like. Can you hear that isn't singable? That's not something that you would naturally sing. So if you start on the 3rd, works fine. Start on the 4th, it doesn't. Crunches again. 5th, fine. And the 7th, I'm sorry, doesn't work on the 7th, because we're putting it on the downbeat again. You have to start on the root. For minor, we add the major 3rd, the worst note. If you wanted to make sure that nobody liked the note you played, play a minor chord with a major 3rd. People, they say, that are tone deaf, that can't hear anything, can hear that sound, and they all go, ugh, what's that? Okay, we're going to add that note to the Dorian minor scale and make it the bebop scale that fits over minor. Dorian. Now let's play the bebop. David Baker has several very good books on the bebop scale, patterns, how to use them, how to fit them into your playing. It's a sound that players have played for years. So it's a very common sound. We don't have the time on the video to go through all of the different patterns and things you can play, but basically you take your regular patterns, add that one note, and make sure you play it on the upbeat. And again, listening to transcribed solos and reading them in a booklet and analyzing them can give you some information on how the jazz masters have done it in the past. In closing, I'd like to read something here that I've prepared. Practicing. Practicing should not be thought of as a chore because it's an opportunity to gain mastery over the tools that you'll need in order to improvise and, at the same time, enjoy what others are playing. You'll be able to hear what they're playing. Always play what you hear in your head. Let your mind be the creator, the originator of the musical thoughts, and you play it on your instrument. Now, if your mind is thinking things that you can't play, then practice and get to the point where you can play them. If you can't think of things to play, listen to others for ideas. It's okay to borrow ideas from other people. For a long time, jazz players thought that wasn't proper, but that's what you should do. Always listen to yourself while you play to make sure that your fingers are actually reproducing what your mind is hearing. You have to keep watch in this respect, or you may find that your instrument and your fingers just play phrases without you having been the originator of those musical phrases. Young improvisers, people who haven't spent much time improvising, may tend to do this until they gain the proper mentalness to be in charge 100% of the time. Tape yourself on a cassette or a mini CD and listen to it back. Are your phrases like those that you would sing? If not, think about why they aren't. Use a play-along recording and sing along with it. Then play on your instrument the same phrases and use the same articulations that you sang. That's the real you. When we sing, it's much closer to our mind than when we play our instrument. Don't try to sing too fast or too many notes at first. Just take your time, sing short phrases, ones that you can repeat on your instrument. And above all, be patient and have fun playing music. I feel jazz is a way to remind us that we don't really ever die. Our bodies die, but whatever we are really made of is eternal. I feel that jazz and music in general, creative musical expression, is nature's universal way of reminding us that we're a part of all that is, was, or ever will be. And that's why the jazz musician loves to play music.